Good evening and welcome to the Standing Resolution, the show where we take the arguments that keep scientists, philosophers, and people with very strong opinions at dinner parties up at night, and we put them where they belong, under a bright light, in front of a live audience, with nowhere to hide. I'm Justice Vale, your moderator, and tonight we are asking a question that cuts right to the heart of how humanity thinks about its future, its responsibilities, and frankly, its priorities. Tonight's resolution is this: we should colonize Mars before we fix the oceans. Now, before anyone in the audience reaches for their phone, I want to be clear about something. Both of our debaters tonight were assigned their positions. That's how we do things here. Because the best way to stress test an idea isn't to find someone who already believes it, it's to find someone sharp enough to defend it, whether they do or not. So whatever you hear tonight, you're hearing the strongest possible case for each side, not necessarily a personal confession. One side will argue that yes, Mars colonization should come first, that it is urgent, visionary, and entirely compatible with caring about Thai.
Let me start with a definition, because the word before is doing a lot of work in this resolution, and I think people hear it wrong. Before doesn't mean instead of. It means in what order we place our boldest institutional commitments, our moonshot ambitions, our civilization-level bets. With that cleared up, let me build the case. First principle, humanity is not a single actor with a single budget. We can walk and chew gum. The question isn't whether ocean health matters, of course it does. The question is what kind of project demands the rare, irreplaceable ingredient of coordinated civilizational urgency right now. And the answer is Mars. Here's why. The oceans are a repair problem. A serious, urgent, genuinely heartbreaking repair problem, but a repair problem nonetheless. We know what healthy oceans look like. We have the scientific frameworks. The barrier is political will and behavioral change, real barriers, but not barriers that require us to invent entirely new categories of knowledge and capability. Mars is a creation problem. We are trying to do something that has never been done in the history of our species, make human life sustainable on another world.
Let me grant Holly something right away because fair is fair. The definition of before as a matter of priority rather than exclusion, that's a reasonable read. I'll work with it, and I'll still show you why it leads us in the wrong direction. Here is the most important thing to understand about the oceans. They are not a background condition. They are the operating system. More than half the oxygen we breathe comes from the ocean. The ocean absorbs an enormous share of the heat our civilization produces. It drives the rainfall patterns that grow the food. When Holly says the oceans are a repair problem, that's technically true, but it understates what happens if the repair doesn't happen. You don't get a degraded version of the world you had. You get a cascading series of failures in the systems that every other human project, including Mars colonization, depends on. Now the backup planet argument. I want to take it seriously because it sounds serious, but ask yourself what it actually means in practice. We are talking about sustaining at best a small research outpost on a frozen, airless world with no magnetic field and soil laced with perchlorates. That is not a lifeboat.
Both sides have laid their foundations, and both have left a few doors wide open. When we come back, Holly's has to answer for that garden shed, and Mordecai has to reckon with what happens when the operating system runs out of time to fix itself. Don't go anywhere. The interesting part starts now. Welcome back, I'm Justice Vale, and you're watching the Standing Resolution, where tonight we're asking whether humanity's next great leap should take us to Mars before we've finished our work with the oceans right here at home. Both sides have had their say, and now it's time to answer for it.
Mordecai's foundation metaphor is vivid, and I want to honor it before I dismantle it. Because here's what the metaphor actually requires: a foundation that can be fixed. And the honest, uncomfortable truth about ocean degradation is that the timeline for fixing it is governed almost entirely by political will and economic behavior, not by whether we also happen to be sending rockets to Mars. Those are parallel tracks. Conflating them suggests that every dollar and every hour spent on Mars is stolen from the ocean, and that's just not how civilization allocates effort. Now the backup planet argument. Mordecai called it a very expensive proof of concept, and he's right that it starts that way. But so did every cathedral, every power grid, every internet. Things that begin as expensive proofs of concept have a habit of becoming the infrastructure of the next era. The question isn't whether Mars is a finished lifeboat today. The question is whether we start building the capability now or wait until the conditions are perfect, which, historically, is how civilizations miss their windows. And I want to gently push back on the operating system framing. The ocean is critical, absolute.
Holly says these are parallel tracks and I'm conflating them. But that's exactly the question the resolution forces us to answer when resources are finite and attention is scarce, which track gets the front engine. Saying both is not an answer to which first, it's a way of avoiding the answer. The paralysis argument is clever, but it doesn't hold. There's a meaningful difference between saying we should neglect cancer research and saying we should not treat Mars colonization as the headline civilizational priority while the systems that make civilization possible are degrading. One is about balance. The other is about sequence. And sequence matters enormously when you're dealing with things that compound. Here's what I find genuinely curious about the cathedral analogy. Cathedrals took centuries to build, and the communities that built them often had their foundations collapse in the meantime. Plague, famine, failed harvests. The ambition was real, the achievement was real, and sometimes the people who commissioned the spires weren't around to see them finished because they hadn't tended to more immediate things. Holly says Mars starts as a proof of concept and becomes.
Hollies, you've argued that Mars and ocean repair run on parallel tracks, separate budgets, separate political will, no real competition. But the countries with the capacity to lead both efforts are the same ones currently falling short on ocean commitments they've already made. So why would adding Mars as a civilizational priority strengthen the political will for ocean repair rather than simply give it one more reason to wait?
That's a sharp question, and I want to answer it honestly rather than dodge it. You're right that the same governments failing on ocean commitments could use Mars as another excuse. That's a real risk. But here's what I'd ask you to notice. Those governments are already failing on ocean commitments without Mars in the picture. The problem isn't the competition for attention. The problem is the absence of urgency. And what Mars does, when it captures the civilizational imagination, is demonstrate that we are capable of treating a long-horizon problem as an immediate priority. That proof of concept matters. Societies that learn to mobilize for one hard, distant goal get better at mobilizing generally. The Apollo program didn't drain American ambition, it filled it. The question isn't whether weak political will exists, it's what changes it. Bold, visible, generational commitment has a track record of doing exactly that.
Mordecai, you've made a compelling case that the oceans are the foundation everything else rests on. But ocean degradation is driven by emissions, agriculture, industrial runoff, forces that ocean-focused policy has been trying and largely failing to redirect for decades. So what specifically changes? If we deprioritize Mars and double down on the oceans, what's the mechanism that turns political failure into political success?
That's the right question to ask, and I won't pretend the answer is simple. The mechanism isn't a new policy framework or a better-worded treaty, it's consequence. The reason ocean commitments have failed for decades is that the costs of failure have been diffuse and delayed, felt most acutely by people with the least political power. What changes that is the costs becoming undeniable and proximate, fisheries collapsing, coastal flooding that hits economies people actually care about protecting. That's not optimistic, but it's honest. What I'm arguing is this. When that reckoning arrives, and it will, we need our institutional attention and our engineering talent pointed at the systems that are failing, not orbiting somewhere between here and a planet we cannot yet live on. Deprioritizing Mars doesn't guarantee ocean success, but prioritizing Mars guarantees we are looking the wrong direction when the foundation cracks.
That is where we leave it before the break, and I'd ask you to sit with both of those answers, because neither one was fully comfortable, and that's exactly where the truth tends to live. When we come back, something unusual, each debater argues the other side's strongest point. It's the moment this show is known for. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Standing Resolution. I'm Justice Vale, and if you've been watching, You know, we are about to reach the part of the show that makes both debaters slightly uncomfortable. The resolution is Mars before the oceans, and right now, each side has to make the strongest possible case for the position they've been arguing against. Here we go.
Here is the strongest version of what Mordecai has been saying, and I want to give it the full weight it deserves. The ocean is not one problem among many. It is the precondition for all the others. It regulates temperature, generates oxygen, anchors the food chains that feed billions of people, and absorbs the punishment of a century of industrial civilization. And it is doing all of that right now, under active stress, with measurable consequences that are already arriving. When you degrade a system that complex and that interconnected, you don't get warning lights and a grace period. You get thresholds crossed quietly, and then cascades you didn't see coming. The case for putting ocean health first isn't sentimentality about the sea. It's systems logic. You cannot run any civilization, including a spacefaring one, on a broken biosphere. Mars will still be there in 30 years. The window to stabilize the oceans may not be. That is a genuinely serious argument. I've sat with it, and here is why I still hold the position I hold. The window framing assumes that redirecting civilizational ambition toward Mars actually closes the ocean window faster. I don't believe it does.
Here is the strongest version of what Holly's has been building toward, and I want to give it a fair hearing rather than a polite nod. The case for Mars first at its most serious is not about escapism. It is about the nature of civilizational risk. We are a species that has never in all of recorded history existed anywhere other than one planet. That is an extraordinary vulnerability, and the history of life on Earth is a history of mass extinctions, most of which had nothing to do with anything any living creature did wrong. The argument is not that Mars replaces Earth. The argument is that a species with the capacity to spread beyond its origin world and chooses not to is making a bet on perfect luck, indefinitely. And the capabilities required to sustain life on Mars, closed systems, radical efficiency, understanding environments we cannot take for granted, those are exactly the capabilities we need to manage a stressed biosphere here. The research is not separate from the problem. It may be part of the solution. That is a serious argument. I have turned it over honestly. And here is where I still part ways with it. The capabilities Mars demands are theoretical future B.
Both sides just argued against themselves, and if you're being honest, both of them made you flinch a little. That's the point. Closing arguments are next, and that's where each side gets one last shot to make the case that actually sticks. Don't decide yet. Give them the chance to earn it. Welcome back, I'm Justice Vale, and this is the standing resolution. Both sides have made their cases, picked them apart, and rebuilt them from the other direction. Now comes the part that matters most, the last argument, the one they want you to carry home. Closing statements, let's hear them.
Here is what this debate has really been about. Not rockets versus reefs, not ambition versus responsibility. It has been about what kind of species we are when the stakes get high. Mordecai has made the oceans vivid and real, and he should have, because they are. But every force degrading them right now, the emissions, the runoff, the warming, those are not being caused by Mars programs. They are being caused by the ordinary operations of a civilization that has not yet decided to be serious about its own survival. And that is the word I keep returning to, decided. Because here is the thing about civilizations. They do not get serious gradually. They get serious when they choose something hard enough to prove to themselves that they can. Apollo did not drain America's capacity for domestic ambition. It demonstrated it. It changed what people believed was possible. That belief is not soft. That belief is the precondition for every difficult thing that follows. We are not choosing Mars instead of the oceans. We are choosing to be the kind of civilization that can do both, because we have proved to ourselves that we do not flinch from the impossible. Fix the foundation, absolutal.
Holly's just said civilizations get serious when they choose something hard enough. I agree with that completely. Where I disagree is the assumption that Mars is the hard choice here. The hard choice is the one we keep avoiding. The hard choice is telling the industries and governments and consumption patterns that are actually degrading the ocean that the reckoning has arrived. That is harder than a rocket. It is harder than a colony on another world because it requires us to change what we do here today in ways that cost us something real and immediate. Mars is audacious, I will grant that freely. But audacity aimed outward at a frozen and airless world is also a way of not looking at the thing right in front of us that we are responsible for and capable of addressing. The oceans are not waiting on new physics. They are not waiting on technology we have not invented. They are waiting on the decision Holly says we need to make, so let us make it. Let us be the civilization that chose the hard thing over the glamorous thing, the present over the distant, the foundation over the spire. Everything humanity has ever built, including its capacity to dream of other worlds, was.
And that is where we leave it tonight. 2 arguments, 1 question, no easy answers, which is exactly how it should be. Holly's Vega asked us to think about what kind of civilization we want to be, and whether reaching for something impossible might be the very thing that teaches us to take care of what we have. Mordecai Quill asked us to look down before we look up, and to reckon honestly with the difference between audacity and avoidance. Both of them came prepared, both of them landed real blows, and I'll say it quietly, both of them made the other side's case a little too well for comfort. That's the job, and they did it. Who won tonight is not my call, it is yours. That is the whole point of this show, and frankly the only part of it I am genuinely humble about. If you want to weigh in, and I hope you do, head to Paxelle.tv. That's also where you'll find the vote for our next resolution, because the argument that keeps you up tonight is probably the one we should be having next week. One thing before you go, the standing resolution features AI personas built to debate. The positions you heard tonight were assigned, not held. What you got was the strongest possible.